folks. Well, as we've come to discover so far on this Frontier Americana tour, here in this vast empty land known as the American West, it's very difficult to sustain a healthy economy and lifestyle, a population center if you will, when there is no transportation. Transportation is vital for shipping things long distance, for people being able to migrate long distance. Transportation is everything. It is of the utmost vitality here. This is no exception in today's location. The Union Pacific Railroad in the mid 1800s selected a little area which they deemed geographically suitable, strategic for the development of a regional headquarters for their railroad company. So here in a small area, well actually quite a large area, which I can only describe as high plains, high prairie, 6,000 feet above sea level, the town of Cheyenne, named after the Cheyenne natives who lived nearby, was settled and developed and grew to be a very important trading center here in the West. A little bit later in time, a train depot was set up in the center of this historic town, you know, so the railroad companies could better optimize their productivity and the town could have a place to congregate and be sort of an acting hub of this little community. Oh hey, look at this. This is a giant boot. How nice. And it has a map of the region. Look at this area, all of this wild frontier area. We're actually right here, right at the very southeast corner. Through its development, Cheyenne became a very, very important area which grew from a town to a city to one of the most important cities in this new state. Oh yes, we have exited Colorado, we have entered our 36th state here on the Coverage Project, Wyoming, the equality state. Over the next week, on and off, as you'll see, we get the pleasure of exploring this new state. This state, Wyoming, is a state that I personally think does a great job and best exemplifies, epitomizes, and even glorifies the true spirit of the Wild West. Yes, let me be the first to say and certify that this is yet another yeehaw state. So here in Wyoming, you can really feel, even today, the spirit of the Old West, the cowboys, the pioneer trails, everything that has to do with this frontier country. And what better way is there to debut such a state than its cultural epicenter, the heart of it all, its most populous city and the state capital of Wyoming, Cheyenne.
These old depots, people come in and they'll say, well, let's do a restaurant over here. Let's do this over there. And for instance, this waiting room, this lobby that you're in, was redone at that time, and actually it's what they decided to preserve here because they had pictures of it, so they could redo it according to what's in those pictures. One of those pictures is up on the wall right over here.
Great, I'll be sure to look at it.
For instance, these chandeliers,
yeah,
they were all gone when this was donated to the city.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, this place had sat vacant for like 20 years. And so people found their way in, found ways to take things apart, take them home, and that's what they did.
Well, you can imagine back 150 years ago, and the transcontinental Union Pacific Railway was in its heyday. You might see this a lot more frequently than now, but still, even so, there's plenty of freight traffic that you can see from this little lobby area. Well, that is the Cheyenne Depot building. One of Cheyenne's greatest wonders. Originally, I thought there was going to be one big booth, but it seems like all over this historic town, you can find big booths anywhere. So walking through the downtown area of Cheyenne, you can still see the character of the historic area has pretty well been preserved. This being the most populous city in Wyoming. You'd think, okay, it's gotta have a cosmopolitan feel, right? No, it really feels like a small town. It is technically a city, but it has a population of 65,000. Now, for the most populous city in a state, that is not saying much. And that really tells you, that really indicates the small world feel of Wyoming as a whole, as a state. And yet, a city primarily made out of brick buildings with small town shops. This is the most culturally urban part of Wyoming you will be getting. Everything else is going to be a lot smaller. You'd be surprised to find even small towns in these long stretches of either plains or wilderness, forest, mountains. Yeah, Wyoming is a very desolate state. It's the least populous state in the whole US. Let's just have a relaxing time for a bit, strolling through the downtown of Cheyenne. See what's up here. Now, although it's very fun to romanticize Wyoming as this rustic and wild frontier, there does have to be some order. And that's why we have the state capitol here, the Wyoming State Capitol. Now, it's weird, Cheyenne is in the southeastern corner, the very, very southeastern corner. And that's not really the trend with a lot of state capitals. Usually you'd find them in the geographic center. Wyoming doesn't play by the rules. Yeah, it's the state capital that deviates one of the farthest in all of the states in the country. It kind of makes sense because here in southeast Wyoming, this region is characterized by having the center of population. Cities like Cheyenne and Laramie. Everywhere else in Wyoming you might find small towns, but nothing like the population you might find here in one of the most dense parts of the state. So what do we think of the state capital of Wyoming? True to its spirit, it's not very flashy. It does have some ornate designs like the gold dome on top and the flag waving proudly. But other than that, it stands as a very, well, practical state capital. It looks beautiful, but nothing too grand. So let's see what we can find in the interior of this state capital. Hopefully, we have better luck than Colorado. You know, just a few years ago, this state capital's interior looked dramatically different. From room to room, a restoration effort in 2019 made the effort to create the original look again back when this building was first erected. And might I say, having been restored to the original 1890 design, it's good that we're coming here in 2022 to understand why this state capital is so important. This room, in particular, holds extreme significance. In 1869, the territory of Wyoming was established, and Cheyenne was given the title of territorial capital. It's a title it's since kept. No other capital of Wyoming has ever existed, either from the territory or the state, but in 1890, Wyoming was given statehood. Okay, pretty late for a state to be given statehood, but go figure, it's Wyoming in the middle of the western frontier, so eventually it got its title as a state. It was down in this little area that Wyoming was officially given a state constitution, giving itself statehood. But in addition, in the Wyoming Constitution, it certified that women would be granted the right to vote, something which no other state in American history up to that point had given in its constitution. This made Wyoming the first state ever to give women the right to vote, giving Wyoming the nickname, the official nickname, the equality state. I guess far removed from any societal norms in these big cities out east, Wyoming was like, hey, you know what? Social class doesn't mean as much when we're all trying to survive here. Let's just give women the right to vote. Now, of course, in 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed, giving women all around the country the right to vote. And indeed, this was the state house in which the first groundwork was made to give everyone, including women, the right to vote. Wasn't that terrific, everyone? Wyoming State Capitol. Well, after a long day walking around, going to various sites, and just exploring, seeing what was here in Cheyenne, let me be real with you, it's tiring. You start to get hungry. So let's take advantage of this moment of hunger and satisfy it with a good bite to eat, and I know just the place to get some authentic Wyoming food.
Okay. Bear with me for 1 minute. Now, because a whole lot of copyrighted music played by the steakhouse I'm going to, you'll see, overwhelmed a great amount of the audio atmosphere, I think it's time to do something unprecedented and narrate over this video. Not live, but rather from the comfort of an office chair now that I'm going through the editing process for this video. You'll essentially hear the revised monologue close enough to the exact words spoken by me back in Cheyenne. Now, I was planning on getting myself a juicy bison burger today. Yeah, of course that's a thing here in the American West. But apparently this restaurant has run out of its supply. Was the supplier unreliable at an inopportune time as we showed up to the equality state? Maybe. But I think we can make it work out, since 10 miles anywhere outside of Cheyenne is going to be a ranch with an ample supply of beef. Have we ever tried a steak before on the coverage project? I don't think so. Wyoming might be the perfect place to try our first steak. Different animal, but perhaps it's a meal which still agrees with the culture and spirit of the Wyoming frontier. So how does it taste? Well, the meat is so tender. All I can say is, well done. Well, actually, no, maybe I can't say that, for I ordered my steak medium well. Jokes aside, it's a juicy steak, well worth the wince you might make once you glance at the check. But also, the garlic mashed potatoes, oh, they go as a great complement for this hearty meal.
There are many things one may think of with the equality state Wyoming. What comes to mind for you all when you think of the big old state of Wyoming? Do you perhaps think of the national parks in Wyoming, such as Yellowstone with Old Faithful, that big old geyser that shoots out every couple minutes? Or perhaps Grand Teton, the mystical forest in the northeast, actually no, the northwest of Wyoming, along with Yellowstone. Similarly, you might think of the nature, the splendor that is Wyoming's natural landscapes, from deserts to high plains to forests to alpine mountains. Wyoming seems to have it all. Would you think of, as we touched upon a little bit, the population of the state? It is the least populated state in the entire country. Doesn't even reach 1 million. We have been to cities that are larger than the population of Wyoming. Finally, you may think of the fabled legends of the Old West and the frontier country. I mean, second to Texas, I would say Wyoming has the most cowboy-esque culture left in the United States. From the storybook-esque adventures of legends like Buffalo Bill Cody to the arduous journeys such as the Oregon Trail that went through Wyoming country, to the rodeo culture that is prevalent throughout the state. I mean, just here in Cheyenne, if we had visited maybe in July or so, we would have gotten to see the most celebrated rodeo festival of them all in the country, the Cheyenne Frontier Days. Yes, all of this centers around Wyoming. And lest I forget, the people who started it all here in Wyoming, the native peoples of the plains, from the Crow to the Arapaho to, yes, the Cheyenne people. From the days of the pioneers to the days of today, as I'm walking on this street right now, here in Cheyenne. I guess it doesn't really matter where you are in the country, from the center of civilization in such an urban agglomeration to the middle of nowhere, like here in Cheyenne. A state capital is a state capital, and that's what you're gonna find here. In Cheyenne, you're gonna find a mix of the past with its pioneer, frontier, Old West heritage, mixed with a Cheyenne of today, full of the chain shops you'll find along the main street and the cars you'll find racing along this highway and other highways surrounding the area. And believe it or not, Cheyenne is close enough to Denver where it could be considered a satellite city of the ever-growing Denver metropolitan area. Hey, would you look at this? We've come across this huge, dare I say mighty, train. This is what's known as the Mighty Big Boy. And it's kind of a little fun landmark here in Cheyenne. How nice. We start with the trains, we end with the trains. It comes full circle here in Cheyenne. I guess it makes sense for an area that revolved around the trains. This is what started it. The transportation of these railroads cemented Cheyenne as a true western town. So if you want a taste of cowboy country alive to this day, there is no better place to look than Wyoming. And if you really don't want to go out too far into the boonies, well, Cheyenne is a large enough city where you can feel comfortable while also discovering the wonder that is the Wyoming frontier. So with that said, standing in front of the Mighty Big Boy here in Holiday Park in Cheyenne, Wyoming, capital of the Equality State. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.